There are many films that tell the story about the human struggle with faith and death, but none of them are as poetic as Ingmar Bergman's 1957 classic, The Seventh Seal. With a title that is taken from the Book of Revelations, this film is adapted from one of Bergman's earlier plays called Wood Painting. Throughout this critical review, I will discuss three major aspects that highlight the reasons why this film is considered by many to be a cinematic masterpiece. The Seventh Seal tells the story of a knight, Antonius Block, who comes home from 10 years on crusade only to find himself questioning the existence of God. When death comes to take Block, instead of going with him, Block challenges him to a game of chess. His goal is to stave off death long enough to find the answers he is looking for about God and for the chance to perform one meaningful act. Throughout this film, Block and his squire Jans take a journey and encounter other characters along the way, including a band of actors named Skat, Joff, his wife Mia, and their son Mikkel, a mute girl, a smith named Plog, and his wife Lisa. To gain a better understanding of the narrative, it is important to note that this film takes on many religious overtones. We see this not only through the story being set in the 14th century during the time of the plague, but it is evident through the characters as well. The film follows the classic three-act structure with a clear beginning, middle, and end. The first act sets up the protagonist Antonius Block with his inciting incident of playing chess with death, with the stakes raised by the end of the act when death tricks Block into revealing his strategy. In the second act, the stakes are raised again when Block realizes that he is no longer the only one death plans on taking after the game of chess is over. And in the end of this act, Block finds himself coming to terms with the questions about the existence of God. In the third act, realizing that the outcome of his chess game is inevitable, Block performs his meaningful act. The production design of The Seventh Seal is made to make the viewer believe that the story really took place in the 14th century. Production designer P.A. Lundgren took on Bergman's version and created a convincing set on the backlot of the Rosunda Film Studios near Stockholm. The set takes on the recreation aspect faithfully, and while the story is fiction, we can believe that the characters are living within the simplicity of the time. Another part of the production design is the costumes. We can gain a better understanding of the characters by looking at what they are wearing. Block in his knight armor tells us not only that he had been fighting in the Crusades, but it also lets us know of his social status according to the world of the film. Yoff, Mia, and Skat's stage costumes let us know that they are performing compared to when they are not. Out of the characters, the most striking costume is Death's. His pale face and black robe tells us that he is an ominous character and not of the human world. One notable detail of the set design I would like to add is when Block and Jans enter the church and find a man painting frescoes of death on the walls. It is said that Bergman got the idea for the story from the fresco of death playing chess that he saw when he was a child. Probably the most notably striking aspect of this film is the cinematography. If you were to turn off all the sound and the subtitles, each frame and every scene would stand as a masterpiece of its own. Director of photography Gunnar Fischer had worked with Bergman on his previous films and is a true genius behind the camera. With a combination of his understanding of what Bergman expected from him and his own talent, Some of the most iconic scenes in cinema history come from this film. For instance, the scene of Death and Block starting the game of chess on the shore, or the scene of the dance with Death. For many, these images define the film. One camera technique we can see used throughout the film is when the camera slowly zooms in on characters during pivotal parts of the story. We see this when Yoff has his vision of the Virgin Mary. The camera slowly moving in on Yoff helps to add to the suspense of what he is seeing. Another time we see this technique is when Yoff and Mia's performance is interrupted by the flagellant demonstration. By slowly zooming in on Yoff and Mia, we can see the horror of the scene through them before we have a chance to see it for ourselves. Another cinematic gem is when Jans confronts Raval, a man who he finds stealing from the dead and remembers from his past. The short key lighting on their faces and the lack of backlighting intensifies the feeling of anger Jans has towards Raval, which lends to the uncertainty of what he may do to him. Another moment is when Block is in the church, confessing to whom he thinks is a monk but turns out to be Death. The camera slowly zooms in on Block as he's speaking of how he can no longer stand the silence of God. This gives us, the viewer, the feeling that we are about to be given access to Block's most intimate thoughts. The harsh key lighting on both Block and Death give way to the rawness of the moment. As for cinematography, for me, the best scene is when Block and Death are continuing their game in the meadow after Block has met his new companions. After Death takes his knight, he then asks Block about his traveling with Yoff and Mia and the baby. Because of the brilliant framing and the shot, this is when we realize that everyone on the hill has just become a pawn in the game. The Seventh Seal was an important film for Bergman because it helped him gain notoriety as a director in the art house genre. This film won many awards, including the Jury Special Prize at the Cannes Film Festival in 1957. It is also responsible for launching the career of Max von Sydow, who played Antonius Block. He would go on to be in many other Bergman films, but he is remembered for his roles in The Exorcist and Star Wars The Force Awakens. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Seventh Seal, and I also hope at some point you get a chance to see this magnificent work of art. Now let's take a quiz. Question 1. Who was the production designer responsible for creating the recreation style set on the backlot of the Rosunda Film Studios? If you answered C, P.A. Lundgren, you are correct. Question 2. What is the camera technique used throughout the film, specifically the scene where Yoff has his vision? If you answered A, zoom, you are correct. Question 3. What is the narrative structure for the Seventh Seal? If you answered D, 3-act, you are correct. Thank you for watching.